The enemy fleet hovered in the darkness of space, their sleek ships forming a blockade around the besieged planet of Varlock. For centuries, the Vashari Dominion had ruled this sector with an iron grip, enslaving weaker species, crushing rebellions, and expanding their empire with ruthless efficiency. They had never feared any foe, until now, until humanity arrived. The UN's nemesis loomed in the void, a monster of war forged from Earth's unrelenting defiance. It was unlike any ship the Vashari had ever encountered, twice the size of their largest dreadnought, its hull blackened by the scars of 100 battles and bristling with weapons that could tear apart entire fleets. The name Nemesis was whispered like a death sentence among the alien ranks. From the bridge, Admiral Elias Varian stood with his hands clasped behind his back, his gaze fixed on the viewscreen. The Vashari fleet was vast, 300 warships against his lone battleship. The odds were, by all logical measures, impossible, except humanity never cared for logic when it came to war. "Admiral," Commander Sarah Holt said, her voice steady. "They're hailing us." Varian exhaled slowly. "Let them speak." The alien's face flickered onto the screen, a reptilian creature draped in ceremonial armor, its golden scales reflecting the dim light. High Warlord Koresh of the Vashari Dominion glared at Varian with undisguised contempt. "Humans," Koresh hissed, "you defy the Dominion, yet you stand alone. Surrender your vessel, and I may grant your species a merciful death." Varian chuckled, shaking his head. "You don't understand, do you?" His voice was almost amused. "We're not here to negotiate." Koresh's slitted eyes narrowed. "Then you have sealed your fate." Varian raised an eyebrow. "No, Warlord, you have." With a slight nod, he gave the command. "Fire." The Nemesis roared to life. The main cannon, an experimental weapon designed to harness the destructive power of a dying star, unleashed a beam of searing white energy. The first Vashari battleship in its path didn't just explode. It disintegrated, torn apart at the atomic level. The rest of the Vashari fleet had mere seconds to react before the Nemesis rained hell upon them. Its railguns fired at impossible velocities, ripping through shields as though they were paper. Swarms of autonomous drone fighters poured from its hangars, weaving between enemy ships, tearing them apart with surgical precision. Koresh's expression shifted from arrogance to horror. "Impossible!" he snarled. "One ship cannot—" "One human warship is all it takes," Varian interrupted coldly. "You should have learned that when we burned your last colony to the ground." The battle was not a battle. It was a massacre. One by one, Vashari warships met their end in blinding explosions. Escape pods were ignored. Mercy was not on the agenda. Humanity had seen what the Dominion did to their prisoners. Entire colonies reduced to labor camps, civilians experimented on, children taken and never seen again. This was not just war. It was vengeance. Varian watched as the enemy fleet crumbled, their command structure dissolving into chaos. The Vashari had always believed they were the apex predators of the galaxy, but they had never encountered humanity at war, and humanity did not forgive. As the last enemy vessel erupted into a fireball, Varian turned his attention to the planet below. Varlock was a fortress world, home to billions of Vashari. It had once been a symbol of their might. Now it was simply a target. "Sir," Holt said, hesitating. "Orders?" Varian's voice was devoid of hesitation. "Glass it." The Nemesis began its final act. Orbital bombardment rained down upon the planet, turning cities into craters, forests into ash, rivers into boiling steam. The screams of the Vashari echoed through intercepted transmissions before silence took their place. A wasteland, just like the countless human colonies the Dominion had destroyed before. Varian turned away from the screen. Set course for the next Dominion world, he ordered. This war doesn't end until they beg for extinction. And with that, the Nemesis disappeared into the void, leaving only fire and ruin in its wake. The Nemesis sailed through the black abyss of space, its colossal frame nearly silent as it moved toward its next target. The bridge was eerily calm, despite the destruction they had just wrought upon Varlock. The enemy's screams, their desperate cries for help, had already faded into the background of war. Admiral Varian stood motionless, staring out at the endless void. His reflection in the reinforced glass looked almost alien to him, his once sharp features now hardened by the weight of command. He had long abandoned the idea of peace. Peace was a lie the Dominion had spat at humanity while putting their boots on Earth's throat. "Sir," Commander Holt's voice cut through the silence. "Our next target is Trion 7. Intelligence suggests it's a major supply hub for the Dominion's core fleets." Varian didn't turn. "What's the estimated population?" Holt hesitated. "Roughly 20 million. The bridge remained silent, tension thickening the air. 20 million Vashari. Soldiers, civilians, workers, children. A hesitation hung in the air, a moment of humanity clawing at the crew's conscience. "Good," Varian finally said. "If we cripple their supply lines, we cripple their war." Holt nodded, but said nothing. She had been with Varian since the first retaliation against the Dominion, had seen the atrocities committed against humanity firsthand. There was no room for doubt, no space for mercy. Mercy was what had let the Dominion expand unchecked. Mercy was what had cost them Earth's outer colonies. A transmission interrupted their thoughts. "Incoming message from the Dominion, sir," one of the officers reported. "High Warlord Koresh survived. He wants to talk." Varian smirked. "Patch him through." The reptilian warlord's face flickered onto the screen. This time there was no arrogance, only barely contained fury and fear. "You will suffer for what you've done, human," Koresh growled, his voice filled with venom. "The Dominion does not fall so easily." Varian leaned forward slightly, his expression cold. "It already has. You just haven't realized it yet." Koresh bared his fangs. "You are monsters!" Varian let out a short laugh, void of humor. "Monsters! You enslaved our people. You burned our worlds. And now when we return the favor, you want to cry foul? No, Warlord. You made this war. We're just finishing it." Koresh's claws curled into fists. "Humanity will not survive this. The Dominion will strike back." "You won't have the chance," Varian said, his voice sharp as a blade. "This is not a war of survival for us. This is extermination." Koresh's face twisted with rage, but Varian didn't give him the satisfaction of another word. He cut the transmission and turned back to his crew. "Prepare the Hellstorm missiles. I want Trion 7 wiped from the maps." No one questioned the order. The Nemesis pressed forward, carrying humanity's wrath across the stars. The Nemesis slipped through the void, silent and unrelenting. Trion 7 loomed ahead, a planet of steel and industry, its surface covered in sprawling shipyards and supply depots that fed the Dominion's war machine. It was no ordinary target. This was a world designed to fuel their empire's endless expansion, a hub of resources that had supported the enslavement of entire species. But today, it would burn. On the bridge, Admiral Varian watched the tactical display. Thousands of Dominion vessels cluttered Trion 7's orbit, transport ships, refineries, battleships in dry dock. The planet's defensive fleet was nowhere near as large as Varlock's had been. The Dominion hadn't expected a direct assault. A mistake. "Status of the Hellstorm missiles?" Varian asked, his voice calm. "Fully armed and ready," Commander Holt confirmed. "We can wipe out the planet's atmosphere in a single strike." Varian nodded. "Fire." The Nemesis came alive. From its underbelly, massive silos opened, and the Hellstorm payloads were launched. Hundreds of missiles streaked toward Trion 7, each one containing a payload designed not for precision, but for annihilation. Planetary shields flared to life, but it was futile. The missiles didn't aim for cities. They detonated in the upper atmosphere. The sky turned red, then black as firestorms swept across the world. Below, the surface of Trion 7 descended into chaos. Factories crumbled, supply depots exploded, and the massive orbital shipyards broke apart, sending flaming debris crashing down on the cities below. Smoke choked the air, blocking out the sun. The Dominion forces tried to fight back. A swarm of defense ships surged toward the Nemesis, desperate to protect their crumbling world. "Incoming enemy fire," an officer reported. "Deploy the drones. Return fire." The swarm of enemy ships barely made it halfway before the Nemesis responded. Drone fighters surged forth, moving like a plague of mechanical death, cutting through the enemy ranks with brutal efficiency. The ship's railguns and laser batteries opened fire, slicing apart the Dominion's defense forces as if they were nothing more than insects. On the surface, the Dominion's command centers sent out desperate distress calls. Messages flooded into the human battleship, pleading for surrender, for mercy, for anything other than what was coming. Varian ignored them all. "You never showed us mercy," he muttered under his breath. He watched as the planet turned to ash. Trion 7 was no longer a world. It was a graveyard. Silence fell over the bridge, save for the hum of the ship's systems. The battle was over. There was no celebration, no cheers of victory, only the cold realization that this war had no end, not until the Dominion itself was nothing more than a whisper in history. Varian exhaled. Set course for the next target. The Nemesis disappeared into the void, leaving behind only smoke, ruin, and the dying screams of an empire. The silence on the bridge of the Nemesis was deafening. No one spoke, no one moved. The screen still showed the burning wreckage of Trion 7, the massive industrial world reduced to a wasteland in mere hours. Even from orbit, the scars were visible. Craters where entire cities once stood, firestorms raging through the ruins. The once thriving supply hub of the Dominion was now nothing more than a drifting corpse. Admiral Elias Varian let out a slow breath. There was no satisfaction in what they had done. No joy, only necessity. "They're calling us monsters," Commander Holt said quietly, reading intercepted Dominion transmissions. "Their military channels are in chaos. Some are calling for all-out retaliation. Others—" She hesitated. "Others are already speaking of surrender." Varian scoffed. "Surrender? After what they did to us? Number, they don't get that option." His eyes were cold, distant. "Not yet." The Dominion had enslaved human colonies for decades. When Earth had finally fought back, it wasn't out of ambition. It was out of survival. The war had started with hope. It had turned into vengeance. "Set course for Jaraxxus Prime," Varian ordered. A murmur ran through the crew. Jaraxxus Prime wasn't just another Dominion world. It was one of their core planets, a cultural and political heart of their empire. A direct assault would send a message across the galaxy. Nowhere was safe. "Sir," Lieutenant Moreau, the communications officer, spoke up. "We're receiving a transmission, but not from the Dominion." Varian frowned. "Who is it?" "It's from the Talani Confederacy. They're offering a ceasefire, mediation between us and the Dominion." The Talani were neutral in this war. They had watched from the sidelines as the bloodshed unfolded, unwilling to take a side. But now they were intervening. Now, after humanity had proven what it was capable of. "Put them through." The screen flickered. and a Talani diplomat appeared, a tall, avian-like creature with silver feathers and piercing golden eyes. "Admiral Varian," the Talani envoy began, his voice smooth, calculated. "We have watched this conflict unfold, and we urge you to reconsider your actions. The Dominion has suffered enough." Varian raised an eyebrow. "Enough?" His voice was laced with quiet anger. "Were you there when the Dominion burned our colonies? When they slaughtered our people like cattle? Where was your intervention then?" The Talani envoy didn't flinch. "We understand your anger, Admiral, but this war has reached a turning point. If you continue, it will not be war. It will be extermination." Varian leaned forward, his gaze cold and unwavering. "That's the idea." A long silence. The Talani envoy studied him, as if searching for something, some hint of hesitation, some remnant of humanity's old self before the war had changed them. But there was none. "Admiral," the envoy finally said, "the galaxy is watching. If you destroy the Dominion completely, humanity will not be seen as liberators. You will be seen as conquerors, and one day someone will rise to do to you what you are doing to them." Varian smirked, but there was no humor in it. "Let them try." The screen cut to black. The transmission ended. The bridge was silent. No one questioned the Admiral's decision. No one argued. They had all lost too much to care about diplomacy now. Holt shifted uncomfortably. "Do you think the other empires will intervene?" Varian sighed. "They won't move unless we make them, and by the time they decide, it will already be too late." The Nemesis jumped to FTL, streaking through the stars like a shadow of death. Jiraxis Prime awaited. The Nemesis emerged from FTL like a phantom of destruction, slipping into the orbit of Jiraxis Prime, one of the Dominion's core worlds. This wasn't some distant colony or a supply hub. It was a beating heart of the Dominion Empire, a world teeming with billions of their kind. It was their pride, their history, their culture. And soon, it would burn. Admiral Varian stood at the command console, watching the massive planet fill the bridge's viewport. Jiraxis Prime was beautiful in its own way, covered in sprawling cities with towering spires of obsidian and gold. Their structures were sleek, their technology advanced, but beneath all the grandeur, it was still the home of slavers and tyrants. Commander Holt exhaled sharply. "They're hailing us, sir. High Chancellor Ithakis himself." The Dominion's leader. Varian nodded. "Put him through." The screen flickered to life, revealing Rathakis, a towering reptilian figure with dark emerald scales and piercing yellow eyes. Unlike Warlord Koresh, who had snarled and spat threats, Rathakis sat calmly in his ornate throne, watching Varian with a calculated expression. "Admiral Varian," Rathakis said smoothly, "you stand at the gates of my world. What will you do?" Varian's face was emotionless. "What I have done to every world before this." Rathakis nodded, as if he had expected that answer. "We underestimated you. We saw humanity as a lesser species, weak, divided. But now I see something else. I see a force that even the Dominion cannot contain." Varian tilted his head slightly. "If you're about to beg, don't waste my time." The Dominion leader's lips curled into something resembling a smirk. "Beg? Number, but I will offer you something no human leader has ever had before. Dominion surrender." A murmur ran through the bridge crew. Even Holt's usual icy demeanor cracked for a moment. Varian's eyes narrowed. "Explain." Rathakis leaned forward. "Withdraw your forces. Stop your war. In return, we will recognize humanity as an equal power. The Dominion will cease all hostilities, return all human prisoners, and sign a non-aggression pact that will last for generations." Silence. It was everything humanity had fought for, everything the war had been about. The nightmare could finally end. with Earth victorious, with humanity free. Varian exhaled slowly, his expression unreadable. And what about justice? Rathicus blinked. Justice? For the billions you enslaved, the colonies you burned, the families you ripped apart, Varian said, his voice calm but razor-sharp. You expect us to just shake hands and move on? The Dominion leader hesitated for a moment, then spread his clawed hands. We cannot change the past, Admiral. But we can shape the future. If you destroy us now, you do not just kill an empire, you create a vacuum, and something worse will rise to fill it. You think yourself the harbinger of justice, but tell me, when does justice become vengeance? Varian stared at him, unblinking. For a moment, something flickered in his expression. Something almost human. Then it was gone. We passed the line between justice and vengeance a long time ago, Varian said quietly. Holt stiffened. Sir, are you saying, fire the Hellstorm missiles? A final silence. The death of diplomacy. Admiral, Rathicus said, his voice quieter now. Do not do this. Varian held his gaze. Goodbye, Chancellor. The screen cut off. The missiles launched. Jaraxxus Prime's sky turned to fire. The planet's defense grid erupted in a desperate attempt to intercept the incoming devastation. But it was useless. The Nemesis had planned for this. Humanity had perfected planetary extermination. Explosions rippled across the world. Towers collapsed. Entire cities were swallowed by firestorms. Billions screamed, and then the screams faded into static. The Nemesis did not wait to watch the final moments. As the planet burned behind them, Varian turned away. Set course for the Dominion home world. It was almost over. The Nemesis tore through the void, a specter of death on its final approach. The Dominion homeworld, Corthion Prime, lay ahead. A planet that had ruled the galaxy for centuries, an empire's heart now awaiting the fate of those before it. The end had come. Admiral Varian stood at the bridge, his expression carved from stone. The fiery wreckage of Jaraxxus Prime still burned in his mind, but there was no regret, no hesitation. The war had started long ago, with Dominion warships glassing human colonies, reducing entire civilizations to slaves. Now, humanity was merely repaying the debt in full. Enemy fleet detected, Commander Holt reported. Their last line of defense, estimated 3,000 ships, all converging on our position. Varian exhaled. All that's left of their once mighty armada. Corthion Prime had thrown everything into this final stand. Battleships, cruisers, swarms of fighters. The Dominion had ruled through force and fear for centuries, but now, faced with extinction, they had no choice but to fight to the last. They're hailing us, Lieutenant Moreau said. Let me guess, Varian muttered. More pleas for mercy? No, sir, Moreau said, voice grim. They say they will fight to the last warrior. No surrender. A smirk played at the corner of Varian's lips. For once, they understand us. A moment of silence settled over the bridge. There was no need for grand speeches, no need for theatrics. Everyone aboard the Nemesis knew what they were about to do. This was not a battle. This was an execution. Engage. The void ignited. The Nemesis moved like a predator, its weapons ripping through the Dominion fleet with precision and brutality. Drone swarms danced through the battlefield, cutting apart enemy fighters like insects trapped in a storm. Railguns thundered, spewing tungsten slugs at near-light speeds, shattering hulls like paper. Dominion ships fought back with everything they had. Plasma beams lanced through the darkness. Missile barrages rained toward the Nemesis. But it was hopeless. Humanity's warship was a fortress of destruction, its defenses unbreakable, its firepower unmatched. Varian watched as the enemy fleet crumbled. One by one, their battleships fell. Command ships detonated in blinding flashes, their crews silenced in an instant. Some Dominion vessels, seeing the inevitability of defeat, tried to flee. The Nemesis did not allow it. "No survivors," Varian ordered. Torpedoes chased down the stragglers, turning their ships into floating wreckage. The Dominion had once terrorized the stars. Now their greatest fleet was nothing more than debris, and Corthion Prime lay defenseless. "Prepare the Hellstorm missiles," Varian commanded. Holt hesitated. "Sir, there are billions down there, civilians." Varian's jaw tightened. "Did they spare ours?" Holt said nothing. She knew the answer. The missiles launched. Corthion Prime's atmosphere turned to fire. The planet's great cities, monuments to an empire that had enslaved species across the stars, collapsed beneath waves of destruction. Plasma storms erupted, oceans boiled, the land itself cracked under the weight of devastation. Humanity had not just won the war. They had erased the Dominion from existence. Varian turned away from the screen. "It's done," he said quietly. Silence filled the bridge. The war that had defined their generation, that had burned through entire civilizations, was over. For the first time in history, humanity stood alone as the dominant force in the galaxy. Varian let out a slow breath. There was no victory song, no celebration. Just the quiet hum of the Nemesis as it disappeared into the stars, leaving nothing but ash in its wake. The void of space stretched endlessly before them, vast and indifferent. The Nemesis drifted in silence, its weapons cooling, its mission complete. Corthion Prime, once the heart of the Dominion, was now a graveyard, a smoldering ruin where billions had drawn their final breath. No cries remained, no fleets, no desperate last stands. Humanity had finished what it started. Admiral Varian stood at the bridge, staring at the dead world below. He had imagined this moment for years. He had envisioned vengeance, the thrill of triumph, the satisfaction of knowing humanity had avenged its dead. But now, looking at the barren wasteland they had created, there was only emptiness. Holt approached him cautiously. "Sir, we've intercepted transmissions across the galaxy. The other empires, they've seen what we've done." Varian didn't turn to her. "And?" She hesitated. "Fear. Some are calling for an alliance against us. Others are silent, watching, waiting." Varian closed his eyes briefly. Of course, this was inevitable. Humanity had not just destroyed an enemy, they had reshaped the balance of power. The galaxy was vast, filled with countless species, some stronger, some weaker, all now forced to reevaluate their place. "They fear us," Holt continued, lowering her voice. "They see what we're capable of." Varian exhaled. "Good." Silence lingered between them, thick and heavy. "What now?" Holt finally asked. "We've won. There's no one left to fight." Varian turned away from the viewport, his expression unreadable. "There will always be someone left to fight." Across the galaxy, distant empires whispered in fear. Governments held secret meetings, debating whether humanity was now the greatest threat to existence itself. Some would submit, others would prepare for war. It didn't matter. Humanity had risen, and it would never bow again. The Nemesis cut through the darkness of space, moving like a silent wraith. The war was over. The Dominion, the great empire that had once ruled the galaxy, was now nothing but dust and ruin. And yet, the galaxy did not celebrate. It trembled. Varian stood at the command console, his eyes fixed on the holographic display of known star systems. One by one, reports trickled in from human intelligence networks, alien fleets mobilizing, fortifications being reinforced, uneasy truces between long-standing enemies forming. The message was clear. The galaxy was terrified. Humanity was no longer a minor species fighting for survival. It was now the dominant force, the apex predator among the stars. And the rest of the galaxy was trying to decide whether to submit or strike first. Commander Holt approached, her expression tight. "We're receiving diplomatic messages from multiple species. Some are congratulating us. Some are less diplomatic." Varian smirked. "Let me guess, they call us monsters?" Holt nodded. "Some are calling us the Butchers of Korthion. Others are demanding answers. They want to know if we intend to conquer them next." Varian let out a slow breath, his fingers tapping against the console. "And what do you think, Commander?" Holt hesitated. "I think they're scared, sir. I think they believe we'll do to them what we did to the Dominion." Varian turned his gaze toward the viewport, watching the endless stretch of space. He had spent his entire career fighting a war for survival, for vengeance. Now that the war was over, he wasn't sure what was left. "We send a message back," he said finally. Holt straightened. "What do we tell them?" Varian's expression was cold, unreadable. "We tell them the truth. Humanity will not start wars, but if they raise a hand against us, we will finish them." Holt gave a slow nod. "Understood." She turned to relay the message, but before she could take a step, another alert flashed on the screen. "Sir," Moreau called out from the comms station, "we're detecting a large-scale energy surge in deep space. Unknown origin." Varian frowned. "Explain." Moreau's hands moved swiftly across the controls, analyzing the data. "It's not a fleet, not a weapon. It's something different. A gravitational anomaly forming outside of mapped star systems. Whatever it is, it's big." Varian's brow furrowed. "How big?" Moreau hesitated. "Large enough to destabilize space-time in the surrounding systems. This isn't just some anomaly. It's a rupture." The bridge went silent. Varian exchanged a glance with Holt. They had fought the Dominion, crushed their empire, and now, just as the war had ended, something new was emerging. "Location?" Varian asked. "Far beyond any explored territory," Moreau answered. "Deep space, past the galactic rim." Varian nodded slowly. "Then we investigate. Prepare the fleet." Holt stiffened. "Sir, we just ended one war. Are we really about to rush headfirst into another unknown?" Varian turned to her, his expression calm but resolute. "We didn't survive the Dominion just to cower in the dark. Whatever's out there, we'll face it." The Nemesis adjusted course, its engines roaring to life. Humanity had won the war. Now it was time to see what lay beyond. The Nemesis moved through the void, its engines humming softly as it ventured into uncharted space. Behind it, a fleet of humanity's finest warships followed in tight formation. Silent, prepared, watching. The war with the Dominion was over, but now something new loomed ahead. The anomaly. Admiral Varian stood at the bridge, his gaze locked on the holographic display. The readings were unlike anything they had encountered before. A gravitational rift, larger than any known celestial body, pulsed at the edge of the galaxy. Space itself seemed to ripple around it, distorting the fabric of reality. "Status?" Varian asked. Commander Holt, standing beside him, shook her head. "Still no known origin. No signals, no transmissions. Just energy. And a lot of it." Lieutenant Moreau, stationed at the sensor console, leaned forward. "Sir, we're detecting movement within the anomaly." Varian's eyes narrowed. "Define movement." Moreau's fingers danced across the controls, pulling up enhanced visuals. The display flickered, revealing a swirling mass of darkness. Then something shifted. Shadows coalesced into shapes, unnatural and massive. silhouettes of what could only be ships emerging from the distortion. Everyone on the bridge froze. "Unknown vessels detected," Moreau confirmed, her voice tight. "Size impossible. Some of them are larger than entire cities." The Nemesis had faced behemoth-class Dominion warships before, but this was different. These things were not just large. They were unnatural, shifting between states of solidity and void, as if the laws of physics barely applied to them. A voice crackled over the fleet-wide comms. "This is Captain Darnell of the Vanguard. What the hell are we looking at?" Varian stared at the screen. "Something old." Holt swallowed hard. "Sir, they're moving toward us." Varian clenched his jaw. "Comms, try to hail them." Moreau initiated an open-frequency transmission. "This is the United Terran Navy. Identify yourselves." Silence. Then a sound. Not words, not static. A deep, resonant noise like a chorus of voices speaking in layered frequencies. It wasn't a language. It was something deeper, something felt rather than heard. A presence pressing into their minds. The bridge crew stiffened. Moreau shuddered, clutching her head. I can't cut transmission," Varian ordered immediately. The sound stopped, but a lingering unease remained in the air. Holt exhaled sharply. "Sir, what the hell was that?" Varian didn't answer. His instincts screamed that whatever lay beyond that rift was not something humanity had ever encountered before, not even in myths, not in the oldest of alien records. This was beyond the Dominion, beyond war. This was something ancient. "Energy spike!" Moreau yelled. "They're charging weapons!" The bridge exploded into action. Alarms blared as the massive shadow ships surged forward, their forms twisting through space with unnatural speed. "All ships, battle stations," Varian commanded. "Open fire!" The Nemesis unleashed hell. Railguns fired in rapid succession, spewing tungsten slugs at near-light speed. Plasma batteries roared, sending superheated destruction toward the incoming threat. The fleet followed, weapons lighting up the void. For a moment it seemed like humanity would do what it always did. Fight, conquer, survive. Then the shadows struck back. Lances of pure blackness lashed out, consuming light itself. The first wave of human ships was torn apart, their hulls crumbling into nothingness before even registering damage. A Dominion fleet would have been obliterated instantly. But humanity was not the Dominion. "Adaptive shielding," Varian barked. "Redirect energy to defensive arrays." The Nemesis shifted, its barriers reforming in real time, countering the unknown energy signatures. The surviving ships did the same, holding formation, learning. Humanity was adaptable. It always had been. The battle raged in the abyss, fire and darkness clashing. The Nemesis weaved between attacks, countering with overwhelming firepower, but for every enemy vessel destroyed, more emerged from the rift. Holt's face was pale. "Sir, there's no end to them." Varian gritted his teeth. They had destroyed the Dominion. Now they were fighting something even worse. And for the first time in a long, long time, he wasn't sure if humanity would survive. The void was a battleground of fire and shadow. Humanity's fleet fought with relentless fury, adapting, countering, surviving. But the enemy was endless. For every shadow ship torn apart by the Nemesis's guns, more emerged from the rift, shifting between dimensions, absorbing damage that should have obliterated them. Admiral Varian gripped the console, his mind racing. He had never faced an enemy like this. Not even the Dominion had possessed such unnatural resilience. Humanity had waged war across the stars. But this was something different. Something beyond war. "Shields at 30%, Holt called out, her voice tight with urgency. "If we don't retreat, we can't retreat," Varian cut her off. "If we run, they follow. and if they reach human space, we lose everything." A moment of silence hung between them, heavy and suffocating. The reality was sinking in. The fleet couldn't win this battle, not in a conventional sense. Moreau's voice cracked over the chaos. "Sir, the rift. There's a destabilization occurring." Varian turned sharply. "Explain." Moreau's hands moved rapidly across the controls. It's like their presence is tied to the anomaly. It's their entry point. If we overload it. "We cut them off," Varian finished, understanding dawning. Holt's expression darkened. "And how exactly do we do that?" Varian's gaze flickered to the status of the Nemesis. The ship was battered, its shields flickering, its weapons burning hot. But its core was still intact. Humanity's warships were built for devastation, and nothing was more devastating than a controlled annihilation. He exhaled. "We take the Nemesis into the rift." The bridge went silent. Holt turned to him, her expression incredulous. "That's suicide." Varian's lips curled into a grim smile. "Number that's war." Moreau's voice wavered. "Sir, if we detonate our core at the right frequency, it might be enough to collapse the anomaly. But that would mean this warship completes its mission," Varian finished. "The Nemesis was built to win wars, and that's exactly what it's going to do." Holt's jaw clenched. "We don't even know if this will work. We could be throwing ourselves into oblivion for nothing." Varian turned to the viewport, watching the endless tide of shadow ships advancing. "And if we do nothing, we guarantee oblivion." A heavy silence fell over the crew. Then, slowly, one by one, they nodded. "All hands," Varian commanded, his voice steady. "Prepare for final approach." The fleet received its orders. The Nemesis would charge into the rift, carrying a payload strong enough to collapse it. The surviving human ships would fall back, carrying word of what had happened here. They would remember. As the Nemesis surged forward, the enemy responded. The shadows swarmed, sensing the threat, pouring everything they had into stopping it. But humanity had already won the moment it chose to fight. Turrets fired relentlessly, carving a path through the abyss. Hull plating melted, shields flickered, warning alarms blared. But the ship never slowed. The rift loomed ahead, a pulsing wound in reality. Varian stood at the bridge, his expression calm. He had fought for humanity's survival his entire life. He had turned planets to dust, crushed empires, reshaped the fate of the galaxy, and now he would end the greatest threat it had ever known. "Detonation in 10 seconds, Moreau announced, her voice steady despite the storm around them. Holt met Varian's gaze, something unspoken passing between them. "See you on the other side," she said softly. Varian smirked. "No, you won't." And then, light. A burst of energy so powerful it tore through space itself. The Nemesis detonated, its core releasing enough force to collapse the rift, sealing the enemy away forever. The surviving human fleet watched as the anomaly imploded, the shadow ships vanishing with it, screaming soundlessly into the void. And then there was silence. Holt, aboard one of the retreating ships, stared at the empty space where the Nemesis had once been. Her fists clenched. Humanity had lost its greatest warship. But it had won. The message was clear, to any species who would threaten them, to any empire that thought humanity was weak. We do not start wars, but we finish them. When the alien fleet appeared in Earth's orbit, the world stood still. Their ships, vast and ominous, cast shadows over continents, blocking out the sun in some regions. The invaders, a species known as the Kavari, had conquered countless planets, their empire stretching across the stars. They didn't come to negotiate, they came to demand surrender. Their message was broadcast in every language across every screen. Your planet now belongs to the Kavari Dominion. Resist, and you will be eradicated. Submit, and you will be assimilated into our rule. You have 24 hours to comply." Panic spread like wildfire. Governments scrambled to respond. The United Nations held emergency meetings, but fear threatened to paralyze them. The Kavari had technology far beyond anything Earth possessed. Their ships bristled with weapons capable of turning cities into craters. Against them, humanity seemed hopelessly outmatched. But then, something changed. In the heart of Washington, D.C., in a secured underground bunker, General Alan Mercer sat in silence, watching the alien message replay. He was an old soldier, one who had fought wars, seen destruction, and understood something the Kavari clearly didn't. Humans never surrendered. He turned to his team, his face carved from stone. "Get me a line to every leader on this planet, now." Within hours, Earth's greatest minds gathered. Not just politicians and generals, but scientists, hackers, and strategists. They worked together in a way humanity rarely did, driven by the knowledge that survival was at stake. The Kavari assumed Earth was weak. They assumed humanity would bow like so many others had before them. They were wrong. General Mercer stepped in front of the cameras, broadcasting back to the Kavari fleet. His voice was steady, his eyes cold. "You came to our planet thinking we would kneel. You assumed we would break. But you don't understand what it means to be human. We are not the strongest. We are not the fastest. We do not have the most advanced technology. But we have something no empire, no conqueror has ever been able to extinguish: our will to fight." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a growl. "You want to take Earth? Then come down and try. But understand this: humanity does not fight fair. We are survivors. We are innovators. We will turn your own weapons against you. We will use every dirty trick, every deception, every ounce of ingenuity to make you bleed. You may have conquered other worlds, but you have never faced anything like us. Leave now, while you still can. Because if you don't, we won't just defeat you. We will make sure the universe remembers what happens to those who threaten our home." The message was sent. The world held its breath. And the Kavari hesitated. The silence that followed was deafening. Across the world, people sat in their homes, in bunkers, in hastily fortified military bases, waiting for a response. The Kavari fleet hovered in orbit, their massive warships like silent gods staring down at an ant colony. For the first time, they didn't immediately strike. They were calculating, analyzing. This reaction from humanity was unexpected. In the Kavari command vessel, Supreme Warlord Vashtal considered his options. He had crushed 100 worlds under his rule, each falling in line without much resistance. But this species, these humans, were different. They did not cower. They did not beg. They did not even seem afraid. Instead, they had issued a warning, a challenge. His advisors urged immediate destruction. "They are primitives," one of them hissed, a reptilian curl of disdain in his voice. "Wipe them out and be done with it." But Vashtal hesitated. Not out of fear. No, never fear. It was something else, a curiosity perhaps, a nagging thought. Other species had submitted because they recognized the inevitable. But these humans spoke with such certainty, such defiance, that it made him pause. Could they truly be so confident? Vashtal's eyes narrowed. He issued a command. "Deploy a single assault squad to the surface. We will test their words." On Earth, as the sun set over Washington, D.C., General Mercer and his team monitored the fleet closely. Every satellite, every hacked alien frequency, every makeshift radar system they had been able to adapt was trained on the invaders. Then, the warning came. "Sir," a young officer called out, her voice sharp with urgency, "we've got movement. A dropship just broke from their formation. On screens across the command center, the alien vessel descended, a sleek black dagger cutting through the sky. Its engines roared like thunder as it landed just outside of a major city, London. The world watched as its doors hissed open, and a squad of Kavari warriors stepped onto Earth's soil for the first time. They stood at nearly 7 feet tall, their bodies clad in armor that shimmered unnaturally. Their weapons, unlike anything seen before, pulsed with a sickly green glow. They carried themselves with arrogance, their leader stepping forward and speaking in perfect English through a translator device. "Earth," he announced, his voice booming. "You have been given a chance to surrender. Your defiance is foolish. We will demonstrate why." Then he raised his arm and fired. A pulse of energy surged outward, obliterating a row of buildings in an instant. A warning shot, a display of power. But Earth was ready. Even before the dust settled, the response came. Snipers hidden in the ruins of a collapsed tower opened fire. Bullets infused with alien metals, reverse-engineered from previous encounters with extraterrestrial technology, pierced the Kavari's armor. The leader staggered, a look of disbelief on his face as dark purple blood seeped from the wound. Then came the real attack. From underground tunnels, human soldiers emerged, armed with railguns and experimental energy weapons scavenged from crashed alien crafts over the decades. From rooftops, drone swarms descended, each one a guided missile loaded with nanite explosives. Civilians, normal people who had never held a weapon before yesterday, threw Molotov cocktails, set traps, and struck from the shadows. The Kavari warriors, trained for direct battle, found themselves in a nightmare of guerrilla warfare. They had expected a fight, but not like this. Not with this level of savagery, this level of coordination. Within minutes, half of their squad lay dead. The remaining few tried to retreat to their ship. They never made it. As the last Kavari fell, cameras broadcasted the battle to the entire world. The message was clear. Earth was not to be underestimated. In orbit, watching from his command throne, Warlord Vashtal clenched his fists. This was no ordinary species. This was a war. The moment the last Kavari warrior fell, Earth erupted. Cheers rang out from underground bunkers, military bases, and homes where families had watched in terror. The impossible had happened. Humanity had drawn first blood. But inside the war room, General Mercer wasn't celebrating. His gaze remained locked on the satellite feeds showing the Kavari fleet above. The battle in London had been a test, and now Vashtal had his answer. The question wasn't if they would retaliate. It was when. "We don't have time to enjoy this," Mercer said grimly, turning to his team. "That was their scouting force. Now they'll come in full strength." Dr. Evelyn Park, one of the lead scientists working on Earth's desperate technological adaptations, nodded. "We bought ourselves a few hours, maybe a day at most. We need to be ready for whatever they send next." Mercer exhaled slowly. "Then we hit them first." The room fell silent. Major Leon Ortiz, a hardened special operations leader, frowned. "Sir, you're suggesting we attack their fleet?" Mercer nodded. "We don't wait for them to bring the fight to us. We take it to them. If we sit here, we lose. But if we hit them where they don't expect it..." He looked around the room, his eyes sharp with determination. "We just might change the rules of this war." Above Earth, in the Kavari command vessel, Vashtal sat in his throne-like chair, his mind racing. Reports from the failed ground assault played on the holo displays around him. He watched his elite warriors be cut down by creatures who shouldn't have stood a chance. This wasn't just resistance. This was something else. His second-in-command, Commander Rethzul, growled in frustration. "They fight like beasts, no honor, no discipline, just chaos and trickery." Vashtal's jaw tightened. That chaos killed our warriors in minutes. For the first time in his long career of conquest, he felt the unfamiliar stirrings of unease. There was something dangerous about these humans. Something unpredictable. "No more tests," he declared. "We will burn their cities to the ground." He stood, towering over the other Kavari in the room. "Prepare the orbital cannons. We'll make an example of one of their capitals. Let them watch their world turn to ash." Rethzul nodded sharply. "Which city shall we destroy?" Vashtal opened his mouth to speak. Then the alarms blared. A Kavari technician scrambled to his console. "Supreme Warlord, we have incoming projectiles from the planet." "What?" Vashtal snapped, striding forward. He stared at the data streaming in, and for the first time, he saw something that sent a jolt of shock through him. Humans had just launched an attack on his fleet. On Earth, hidden deep in the Arctic, a secret military base hummed with life. It was known only by a code name: Project Ragnarok. For years, scientists and engineers had worked in secrecy, studying whatever alien technology had crashed onto the planet over the decades. They had built weapons, defenses, things that shouldn't have been possible for a civilization as primitive as Earth. And now, for the first time, they were being used. Massive railguns, hidden beneath icy mountains, roared to life. Hypersonic missiles, cloaked with stealth tech, streaked through the atmosphere. Experimental drone fighters designed using scavenged alien schematics shot toward orbit. Humanity wasn't just resisting, they were fighting back. The first railgun slug tore through the shields of a Kavari battleship like paper. A second later, the ship exploded in a fiery blast. Hypersonic missiles struck the fleet, detonating with a force they hadn't anticipated. The Kavari, who had expected an easy conquest, now found themselves under siege. On the command vessel, Vashtal gripped the armrests of his throne as his fleet shook under the assault. Impossible. This was impossible. No species had ever dared attack a Kavari fleet in orbit. No world had ever launched such an offensive. And yet, here was Earth, throwing everything it had at them. This was no weak, defenseless species. This was something else, something dangerous, something he might have underestimated. The command center aboard Vashtal's flagship was chaos. Kavari officers shouted over one another, scrambling to make sense of what was happening. The humans were not supposed to be capable of this. No pre-spacefaring civilization had ever launched an orbital assault against the Dominion. Yet here they were, firing advanced weapons, scoring kills. Another battleship erupted in flames, torn apart by railgun slugs. Vashtal clenched his fists, watching as his once dominant fleet now found itself under siege. "This is unacceptable," his second-in-command, Rethzul, roared. "Deploy all fighters! Wipe them out!" Vashtal's eyes narrowed. Something wasn't right. "These weapons," he muttered, studying the battlefield. "Where did they get them?" Rethzul barely paid attention. "It does not matter. We have the advantage in numbers and firepower. We crush them now, before—" Before he could finish, another Kavari officer turned, his reptilian features twisted in shock. "Supreme Warlord, we have a breach in our communications network. The humans—" Static filled the holoscreens. Then a voice cut through. A human voice. "This is Captain Jackson Holt of the UNSF Valkyrie. We have boarded your ship." For a moment, there was nothing but stunned silence. Then came the alarms. Far above Earth, a single Kavari battleship drifted, its crew already dead or dying. Inside, human soldiers moved like ghosts, weapons in hand, their armor modified from scavenged alien tech. They had boarded using stealth shuttles, bypassing defenses that should have been impenetrable. Now they moved through the corridors of the alien warship with lethal efficiency. Captain Jackson Holt led the charge. His team had trained for months under the assumption that one day Earth would face an alien threat. They had studied every piece of recovered technology, prepared themselves for this very moment. The Kavari thought they were invincible. Jackson was here to prove them wrong. He motioned for his squad to advance. "Find their command center. Take control of their systems. If we can hack into their fleet, we can turn their own weapons against them." A Kavari warrior rounded the corner, raising a plasma rifle. Jackson fired first. The alien crumpled, lifeless. The humans moved forward. Earth wasn't just fighting. They were taking the war to the enemy. Back on Vashtal's command ship, a Kavari officer paled as new data flashed across the screen. "Supreme Warlord, another ship has gone dark. The humans have taken it." Vashtal's claws dug into the armrests of his throne. His fleet, the might of the Dominion, was being hacked, infiltrated, and dismantled from within. No world had ever fought back like this. No species had ever dared. This was no ordinary resistance. This was something new, something that sent a rare, foreign sensation creeping into Vashtal's chest. Something he had never felt before. Fear. Vashtal's breath came slow and heavy as the realization sank in. Humanity was not just resisting. They were learning, adapting, and now they were winning. His fleet, once a symbol of unrivaled dominance, was crumbling. Another ship flickered on his tactical display, then went dark. The humans had boarded it. "Supreme Warlord," Rethzul rasped, his voice tight with disbelief. "We must retreat. Regroup." Vashtal's claws dug into the armrest of his throne. Retreat? The idea was unthinkable. The Kavari Dominion had never retreated from a war. But this wasn't a war. This was a message, and humanity was carving that message into the very bones of the Dominion. A new alert flashed on the command console. Vashtal's eyes narrowed as the holodisplay shifted, revealing a single human ship, a crude, ugly thing by Dominion standards, moving fast, burning hard toward his flagship. A suicide run? He bared his fangs. Foolish. He would swat them down. Then, the comms came alive. A voice, human, calm and controlled, rang through his ship. "Vashtal," the voice said, using his name without honorifics. "An insult. This is General Mercer of Earth. You came here expecting easy prey. You expected submission. Instead, you found something else." The human ship continued its approach. "You found a species that fights. A species that does not kneel. A species that will never forget what you've done today." A cold chill ran down Vashtal's spine. "Leave now, while you still can, because the next time you return..." The human ship suddenly veered off course at the last second. Not a suicide run, but a distraction. At that same moment, another of Vashtal's warships exploded, hacked and overridden from within. And then Mercer finished his warning. "You won't be facing a species defending its home. You'll be facing a species that learned how to hunt." The transmission cut off. For the first time in his long, blood-soaked reign, Supreme Warlord Vashtal hesitated, and then, with the weight of the moment crushing down upon him, he uttered a word that had never been spoken by a Kavari in war. "Withdraw." The Kavari fleet disengaged. Engines flared. Gravity drives spun to life. One by one, they vanished into the void. Earth had won, not just the battle, not just the war. They had announced themselves to the galaxy. And somewhere, in the far reaches of space, the Kavari Dominion would whisper among themselves in hushed, uneasy tones. Humanity was not to be trifled with, because the next time an alien fleet darkened Earth's skies, the hunters would be waiting. The war was over, but Earth was forever changed. Victory came at a cost. Cities still smoldered from the Kavari assault. Millions were dead. Entire governments had collapsed under the weight of the invasion. But in the rubble, something new was born, something that had never existed before. A united Earth. The night the Kavari fled, celebrations erupted across the world. People flooded the streets, chanting in every language. It didn't matter where they were from. They were human, and they had survived. But in the shadows, behind the fireworks and the tears of joy, the leaders of Earth knew the truth. Survival wasn't enough. General Mercer stood in the newly formed Earth Strategic Command Bunker, deep beneath the Arctic ice, surrounded by the best minds left on the planet. Scientists, military leaders, engineers, every survivor who had proved themselves invaluable during the war. The room was tense. The victory felt hollow, because every person here knew what came next. "We have a choice," Mercer said, standing at the head of the room. "We can rebuild, pretend this was just an anomaly, go back to our old ways." His jaw clenched. "Or we prepare, because I promise you this, the Kavari will return, and they won't come alone." The room was silent. No one disagreed. Dr. Evelyn Park adjusted her glasses, scrolling through data on her holoscreen. "We've salvaged nearly a dozen Kavari vessels. The tech alone has pushed our understanding of physics forward by centuries. We've also intercepted their communications before they left. They've labeled us as a threat." She glanced up. "That means the Dominion will be watching. They won't allow us to grow unchecked." "Then we don't wait," Captain Jackson Holt said, his voice firm. He had been on the front lines, had watched his soldiers die holding the last defensive lines in the war. "If we wait, we die. We do what they don't expect." Mercer nodded. "We take the fight to them." A murmur spread through the room. It was madness. Humanity had barely survived. They had only won because of sheer unpredictability and luck. But if the Kavari came back with their full armada, Earth wouldn't stand a chance, unless Earth was no longer just Earth. "What are you suggesting?" Dr. Park asked carefully. "We expand," Mercer said simply. "We take their technology, we study their tactics, and we don't just rebuild Earth." His eyes burned with the fire of a man who had seen too much death, too much loss. "We build an empire of our own." The idea hit the room like a shockwave. Humanity, an empire. For centuries they had fought each other over borders, resources, ideologies. Now they had one enemy, one threat to focus on. And suddenly the idea of nations seemed small. Humanity would not just defend, they would conquer. Dr. Park exhaled. "I assume you have a plan?" Mercer nodded. He tapped the holotable, bringing up a map of the solar system. "Step 1. We fortify Earth. Every surviving nation contributes to a global military force. Every scientific institution works toward reverse engineering the Kavari technology. No more secrecy. No more division." No one argued. "Step 2. We expand beyond Earth. The Kavari thought we were trapped on this planet, easy to crush." He leaned forward. "That ends now. We terraform Mars, establish outposts on Europa and Titan. We build shipyards on the Moon. Earth is no longer our only home." Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. The Kavari had assumed humanity was contained, that they could destroy them in a single strike. That assumption had been wrong. "Step 3. Mercer's voice lowered. "We build a fleet." The room tensed. Jackson Holt folded his arms. "Not just a fleet for defense." Mercer met his gaze. "Number A, fleet for war." Silence. Then Evelyn Park spoke. "You're talking about an offensive force." Mercer exhaled. "The Kavari won't forget what happened here, but they'll convince themselves it was luck, a fluke. They'll assume we won't grow fast enough to be a real threat." His fists clenched. "We prove them wrong." His voice was calm, but the weight of it sent a shiver through the room. "The next time an alien fleet enters our system, we don't just fight them off. He looked around the table, meeting every eye. "We chase them down, we take their worlds, and we never let them threaten us again." There was no applause, no cheers, only determination. Humanity had been hunted. Now they were the hunters, and the galaxy would soon learn what it meant to fear them. The transformation of Earth was swift and relentless. In the aftermath of war, desperation fueled progress, and humanity did what it did best: adapted. Factories that once built cars now assembled warships. Universities that once taught economics now specialized in quantum mechanics and alien propulsion systems. Every surviving government funneled resources into the same goal, ensuring humanity would never be prey again. The United Nations was dissolved, replaced by a single ruling body, the Terran Dominion. It wasn't a government, it was a war machine. A council of generals, scientists, and strategists led the effort, answerable only to one doctrine: expanse, control, domination. No more wars between humans, no more divisions. The old world was dead. The new world belonged to the species willing to claim it. Humanity was no longer content to survive. They would conquer. 3 years after the war, the first Terran war fleet was launched from the moon's newly built shipyards. The vessels were brutal and efficient, hybrids of human engineering and reverse-engineered Kavari technology. Sleek hulls, reinforced titanium plating, magnetized railguns, plasma-based energy weapons, and AI-assisted targeting. They were not built for exploration. They were built for revenge. Mercer stood aboard the bridge of the Retribution, the first human warship capable of interstellar travel. Through the massive viewport, he saw Earth below, scarred yet stronger than ever. This was the moment history would remember, humanity's first step beyond its cradle. Jackson Holt, now Admiral of the fleet, stood beside him, arms folded. His uniform bore the insignia of the Terran Dominion's elite command. "We're ready," Holt said. Mercer nodded. "Then let's remind the Kavari why they should have wiped us out when they had the chance." With a simple command, the Terran war fleet activated their gravity drives and vanished into the void. Humanity had come to the stars, and they were hunting. The Kavari Dominion, still recovering from the shock of their defeat at Earth, had underestimated how quickly humans could adapt. They believed it would take centuries for Earth to become a real threat. It took 3 years. The first human attack came without warning. A Kavari outpost near the edge of their territory, small, insignificant by Dominion standards. It was supposed to be safe. Then the humans arrived. They descended like a storm. The outpost's defense systems barely had time to activate before the Retribution and its fleet shattered them. Railguns fired molten slugs the size of cars, ripping through Kavari battleships. Plasma cannons incinerated defenses. The Kavari barely had time to send out a distress signal before the fleet landed on the surface. The Terran Dominion soldiers were unlike anything the Kavari had faced before. Faster, deadlier, relentless. Equipped with armor forged from reverse-engineered alien tech, carrying weapons designed to kill Kavari warriors with brutal efficiency, they swept through the outpost like a plague. They didn't just kill, they captured. 2 days later, the entire Kavari Dominion received a transmission. The image flickered to life on every Kavari world, station, and ship. A human stood in the center of the screen. General Mercer. Behind him, bound in restraints, were Kavari prisoners, officers, soldiers, civilians, some wounded, all terrified. Mercer's voice was calm, controlled. "This is General Mercer of the Terran Dominion. You came to our world, thinking we were weak. You burned our cities. You slaughtered our people. You tried to break us." His expression darkened. "You failed." He turned, motioning to one of the Kavari prisoners, a high-ranking officer, a Dominion commander. "This is your warning," Mercer said. "For every human life lost in your invasion, we will take 10 of yours. For every city you burned, we will reduce a Kavari world to ash. You gave us no mercy. Expect none in return." The camera zoomed in on the Kavari officer. He was shaking. "You told us we would be hunted." Mercer leaned in close. "You were right." The transmission ended. The Kavari's response panic spread through the Dominion. The Kavari Council convened in emergency meetings. The humans had done the impossible. They had survived. They had thrived. And now they were striking back. Vashadal, the supreme warlord, watched the broadcast in silence. His claws dug into his throne. He had made a mistake, a terrible mistake. He should have exterminated humanity when he had the chance. Now, it was too late. The humans had evolved, and they were coming. The Kavari's reckoning panic rippled through the Kavari Dominion. For centuries, they had been the hunters, the ones who dictated the fate of lesser civilizations. But now, for the first time, they were afraid, because humanity had returned, and they had come for war. Vashtal sat on his war throne, claws digging into the armrests. His advisors whispered among themselves in the vast, towering war chamber of the Dominion's capital world, Kavaros Prime. Their voices were filled with unease, a stark contrast to the arrogance they had displayed mere years ago when they first set their sights on Earth. The humans had changed. They had learned. They had grown. And now they were systematically dismantling the Dominion's outer defenses. Vashtal's command room flickered to life as a live report came in from the Jorvak sector, where one of the Dominion's mid-sized war fleets had engaged human forces. The battle should have been an easy victory. It wasn't. The holographic display showed twisted wrecks of Kavari warships, their once imposing hulls reduced to debris. The Terran fleet had emerged almost unscathed, their brutal tactics overwhelming the Dominion forces before they even had a chance to react. "They are relentless," one of Vashtal's generals admitted, his voice tinged with fear. "Their ships move in ways that defy our predictions. Their weapons are—" Vashtal slammed his fist onto the armrest, silencing the room. His yellow eyes burned with fury. "Their weapons are our weapons," he snarled. "Stolen from us, improved upon. These creatures are nothing but vermin who scavenge from their betters." Silence. No one dared contradict him. But the truth lingered in the air, like poison. Humanity had surpassed them. The old tactics no longer worked. The Kavari had always relied on their technological superiority, their overwhelming force. But humans didn't fight like the others. They were unpredictable. They adapted too fast. And, worst of all, they fought like creatures who had nothing to lose. Earth's next move. Back in Terran space, General Mercer watched the war unfold from the Retribution's command deck. Hollow projections of star systems flickered before him, each marked with the aftermath of recent battles. One thing was clear. The Kavari were reeling. The once mighty Dominion was crumbling at the edges. Their supply lines were being cut. Their forward bases were being turned into human strongholds. The Kavari were retreating deeper into their territory, desperate to regroup. And humanity was right on their heels. Mercer turned to his advisors. "We're done taking their scraps," he said. "The outer systems were just the beginning. We take the next step." Jackson Holt, standing at his side, gave a slow nod. He understood what Mercer was proposing. This was no longer about defense. This was about conquest. They weren't just fighting to protect Earth anymore. They were fighting to erase the Kavari threat forever. Operation Scorched Sky. The plan was brutal. Human forces would launch a three-pronged assault into the heart of the Dominion. They would bypass Kavari strongholds, punch straight through their core systems, and lay siege to Kavaros Prime itself. No hesitation. No mercy. The Kavari had come to Earth expecting an easy victory. Now Earth was coming to them. The fall of Jorvak Prime. The first major strike came against Jorvak Prime, the industrial heart of the Dominion. If Earth could cripple its production lines, the Kavari war machine would grind to a halt. Humanity didn't just attack. They descended like gods of vengeance. Terran warships tore through orbital defenses, blasting through Kavari fleets with ruthless precision. Planetary bombardments targeted military installations, reducing once impenetrable strongholds to molten slag. And then the ground forces arrived. Heavily armored Terran Dominion shock troopers, clad in reinforced exosuits, stormed the Kavari cities. Their weapons cut down enemy soldiers with terrifying efficiency. For the first time in history, Kavari civilians fled before an enemy. Humanity had no interest in peace talks, no interest in surrender, only retribution. The last transmission from Jorvak Prime. As Jorvak burned, a final transmission was sent from its surface, a desperate plea from the Dominion High Commander of the sector, broadcast across Kavari space. This is Commander Vektal. The humans. They are not what we thought. They do not fight for survival. They fight for destruction. We cannot stop them. The signal was cut off. The Kavari Dominion had never known fear. Now, it was all they knew. The final war begins. Vashtal sat in the war chamber of Kavaros Prime, watching as the transmission ended. His claws trembled, not with rage, with dread. The humans were coming. And for the first time in Dominion history, the Kavari had no idea how to stop them. The siege of Kavaros Prime. The Kavari Dominion had stood unchallenged for thousands of years. Their fleets had crushed empires. Their warriors had slaughtered entire species into extinction. No race had ever dared to bring war to Kavaros Prime, the heart of the Dominion. Until now. For weeks, the Terran Dominion's war fleet had carved a path through Kavari space, leaving devastation in its wake. Colony worlds were razed, military installations obliterated, and entire fleets shattered in battles that lasted mere hours. The Kavari had fought back, throwing everything they had into stopping the human advance. It wasn't enough. And now, they were out of time. The first Terran warships broke out of warp just beyond Kavaros Prime's defense perimeter. Hundreds of them. Their dark, jagged hulls gleamed under the light of the planet's twin suns. Then came the dreadnoughts, monstrous ships the size of cities, their hulls bristling with railguns, plasma turrets, and kinetic cannons designed to tear through even the strongest shields. At the center of the fleet, standing like a monument of vengeance, was the Retribution. On the bridge, General Mercer watched the Kavari homeworld loom before them. The planet's surface glittered with the lights of its massive cities, the crown jewel of the Dominion, and soon, its graveyard. "Status?" Mercer asked, his voice calm. Jackson Holt, standing beside him, scanned the incoming reports. "Defenses are at full power. They have 3 orbital fleets, planetary ion cannons, and shield barriers over the capital." Mercer smirked. "Good. We'd hate for this to be too easy." He turned toward the fleet-wide comms. "This is General Mercer to all Terran forces. The Kavari once believed they could burn our world and walk away. They thought we would kneel. They thought we would fear them." His voice darkened. "They were wrong." He gestured toward the enemy planet. "Today we end this war. No mercy, no retreat, no survivors. Burn their cities, crush their armies, wipe the Dominion from history." A pause. For Earth. The response came in a thunderous chorus across every ship. "For Earth!" Then the fleet fired. The last stand of the Kavari. The battle began in fire. Terran dreadnoughts unleashed hell. Railgun slugs the size of buildings ripped through Kavari warships, tearing through their shields like paper. Plasma torpedoes slammed into defense stations, reducing them to burning wreckage. The Kavari fought back with desperation. Their fleets swarmed the human warships, their ion cannons and energy lances carving through space. Explosions bloomed across the battlefield as ship after ship was annihilated. But for every human vessel destroyed, 10 Kavari ships fell. They couldn't match human adaptability, couldn't match the ferocity of a species that had learned to survive against impossible odds. The battle raged for hours. Then the planetary bombardment began. Terran warships descended into the lower atmosphere, unleashing hell upon Kavaros Prime. Entire cities vanished in pillars of fire. Military bases were reduced to molten slag. The Kavari's golden capital, Varak-Tul, became a sea of smoke and ash. The fall of the warlord. Deep in the burning ruins of the Kavari capital, Vashtal stood in his throne room, staring at the devastation beyond his shattered windows. The once mighty warlord, the conqueror of worlds, the ruler of the Dominion, trembled. His guards lay dead around him. His advisors had fled. His empire was gone. And then the doors crashed open. Mercer entered first, stepping over the wreckage, his armored boots echoing against the stone floor. His titanium-plated exosuit gleamed with battle scars, and his rifle was still smoking from the last kill. Behind him, Terran soldiers poured in, their weapons aimed at the last Kavari leader. Vashtal bared his fangs. "You are nothing but animals." Mercer stepped closer. "No," he raised his pistol. "We are human." The gunshot echoed through the chamber. Vashtal, the supreme warlord of the Kavari Dominion, fell. The end of the Kavari. Across Kavari space, the news spread like wildfire. Their warlord was dead, their fleets destroyed, their homeworld in ruins, and Earth's final message rang loud and clear. "You threatened our world. Now your kind ceases to exist." The surviving Kavari, those who had fled, those who surrendered, were given one option: exile. The Terran Dominion did not offer peace, did not offer negotiations. The Kavari had tried to wipe out humanity, and now humanity had returned the favor. The dawn of a new empire. Mercer stood aboard the Retribution, gazing down at the burning world beneath him. Earth had won. The Kavari were gone. The Dominion was no more. And now? Now, humanity ruled the stars.